Welcome to Monarchist Minute, Royalist news and discussion out of the good old US of A. I am Charles York. Joining me tonight is our chaplain, William Stout, our vice chancellor, Victor Smith, trad writer, and Friedrich Mangolia, our financier. I can't remember his actual title. Treasurer. Whoops. Anyways, it is my week off, so I will actually shut up now. Okay, bye.
Tonight, we will be discussing a couple of topics. First, this is Aesthetics Month, where we will be discussing the decline in Western architecture. But first, we will be discussing a very important topic, and that is the announcement of His Majesty King Charles III's first official state visit. He will be going to France and Germany. He will be the first British monarch to address both the French and German parliaments in his tenure. He will also be, if I can get back down to publicity chat, here we are. He will pay respects for victims of the Allied bombing of Hamburg. He will be the Jewish children of the Kindertransport who escaped the Nazis, and he'll be visiting with Ukrainian refugees during this official state visit. So His Majesty off to a flying start with his first official state visit.
It's quite exciting, that's certainly to say. I mean, I can't wait for the pardon me. I just can't wait until the coronation, though. Like, thankfully, I don't have anything on that day, so I'm going to be able to watch it with my parents.
Wait, what day is it again?
It's like in May. I think it's the 6th of May, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's
it is the Saturday in May. It is the first Saturday in May.
Yeah, then it is. It's the 6th. It's the 6th.
Oh, sweet. So I'll have to get to watch it too.
We all will get to watch the coronation on television, most likely.
It's going to be a very fun day for us all, I think.
Then we can laugh at how small the Republic and the Republic protest will most likely be. Look, everyone, point and laugh.
Yeah. Now it is time we throw our heads back in laughter. Ready? Go.
Right. Yeah. Let us. So, what do we think about this official state visit? Let's take the topic off the coronation.
I think it's great.
Go. Yep. I mean, honestly, it's going to be a great way for him to reach out. And I mean, he's kind of just been there for most of his life, but now he's actually going to be able to get out and speak to representatives and diplomats from other countries and start leading in the way that he truly wants to lead. Because from what I've heard and from what I've seen, he has a fairly different idea of how he's going to rule than how his mother did.
I do think Charles is going to be a much more active monarch than Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth was. And we saw that primarily before he ever became king, while he was still crown prince, where he was big in charities, big on projects. He was a major advocate for traditional urban planning and agriculture, and he even did funded studies and experimental farms even. A while back, there was a wonderful video about an experimental farm he had where he used only natural and holistic methods to run the farm and fertilize the land and such.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that this is going to be kind of his way to speak to other diplomats on what his plan is. Like, not just to kind of start, but to actually inform them of how he's going to start doing things. And, God willing, abolish the Republic. But that's thinking way ahead in advance. I think that we should just honestly be excited for these visits to these countries and excited for the coronation. It's going to be great.
All right, so go ahead.
Never mind. I'm gonna save this for open forum at the end.
Okay,
Sounds
great.
good.
So
Let us move on.
now let us move on into the discussion about architecture.
So, on the discussion of architecture, this was brought up more as a philosophical topic to discuss, correct? Less of like a personal stories kind of
I
thing.
think basically.
I believe so, yes.
So, this, as we said, is Aesthetics Month, and this week we're going to be talking about the state of architecture in times previous, in times current, and how, in the opinion of some, and I think most people on here, that architecture and kind of that aesthetic has declined recently. So I'd be willing to start if no one else has anything to say on it, at least yet.
Well, I will start off by saying that, as in all things, not just architecture, people generally tend to look for what is true, good, and beautiful. Those are the guiding principles in, well, everything. But in this particular case, the buildings that are being built now, the ugly rectangular skyscraper glass things, are they beautiful?
I mean, if you're asking for opinions, no.
Yes.
Yeah, no, not at all.
No, absolutely not. And
So
to follow the... Go ahead. Go ahead.
the biggest issue with modern architecture is primarily as a result of the need, especially in the Western world, for rapid post-war reconstruction of cities, but also due to changes in needs, is that function took a very large step over form, and we've never quite bounced back from that.
That is true, but you look at some of them and you think this isn't function. This is just disgusting.
Agreed. And I
Agreed.
think
I think it was the Scottish Parliament building. They tore down the old one
Oh.
and built a new one, and it was just
No,
like
no, no.
glass and concrete, and it looks
They didn't
horrible.
tear down the old one. The old one's a museum now, I think.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can remember.
They would
And-
never be allowed to tear down the old Scottish Parliament. Are you mad?
Well, I couldn't
that, I
remember.
mean, I've seen worse. And I think that if we want to truly interconnect this topic with monarchism, we can talk about how I think that the decline of I think it's agreed upon that modern architecture is bad. I think that we can track the decline of architecture as time goes on with how modern society has been. I mean, when we look at the times when monarchy was prevalent, right? Antiquity, medieval, Renaissance. We have beautiful, well, finely crafted structures made by professionals. Absolute beauties from St. Peter's Basilica to Capitol buildings and palaces around Europe to even places like in Africa that had monarchies, like in Timbuktu and in China and Asia as a whole. Beautiful, beautiful buildings. And then as the advent of more republican little r ideals, with the ideals of the great masses being in control, as that became more prominent as a view within the world, we also saw the decline of architecture. The first
No.
declines we see are in the early industrial period, where we see things becoming more, as you said, function over form. And I think the true killing blow was in the post-war period of World War II, where it just became total function. We see place in the US just copy paste houses from in all these suburban neighborhoods built
Now,
completely just weird. And then in the Soviet Union, we see brutalist style architecture basically built like farms for pigs.
now, I would disagree. I don't think the problem is inherently Republican. I think the problem is inherently consumerist or capitalist in its nature, where these buildings are being built because they're cheap and affordable, like cookie cutter houses and tower blocks, and they're made to
Oh, sorry,
keep
yeah.
demand before like any architectural purpose of beauty. Like it used to be when you build a building, the building was a statement. The building stood for something. Now we build buildings to build buildings because it's necessary to build buildings. And I think it follows a greater trend when we start seeing obscuranist ideas in modern art, and it's mainly a cultural issue more than an issue with republicanism, because we do see some great architectural ideas come out of republicanism, such as socialist realism in the East, or personally, in my opinion, which I think is the peak of architecture, the perfect meeting of form and function, that being the glorious, beautiful Art Deco structures that fill New York City skyline to this day. Buildings like the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, and such, which are both not only incredibly good in function, but also incredibly beautiful in form.
I'd agree with that, but I think that you misunderstood my argument. I wasn't arguing that republicanism caused a decline in architecture. I think they track together. I think that there is an overall sense of something within people as the political system shifted from monarchy to republic, that also changed how we view things. I think that we care less about beauty in the modern age, and that, I mean, I do agree with you, Art Deco is beautiful, but I think that, I mean, even that tapered off in the 50s, and lots of these, beautiful styles of building, Baroque, obviously, to Art Deco, classical, Gothic, all these beautiful styles just die off with, I mean, I'm just saying it tracks along with republicanism, with modernism. I think that, and I think we can kind of track that all together as a core idea of societal degradation.
And I will also point out, and this may be a little unpopular, but with the popularity of the game Minecraft, in which you build with blocks and you measure things in blocks, it incentivizes you mostly to build block-like structures.
I rescind that point because you see some of the crazy things people build in Minecraft. It's a lot better than what a lot
That
of
is
people
true.
just wanna
Like
make it.
you've seen people in Minecraft. Usually, they don't even go for like function. They usually just go for form. Like a
Because
lot of
that's the
time,
thing,
people.
in
Yeah, because
Minecraft,
yeah,
there's
in
very
Minecraft
little
you can do
use for
anything.
form or for
Yeah,
function.
exactly.
Sorry.
Like
Yeah, it's not the
building
point.
an
It's not the point of
entire
Minecraft. The point of Minecraft is not function. It's form.
Like
Well,
I've seen people build entire like scale models of the Twin Towers or the Chrysler Building or the Palace of Versailles to
Well, you
absolutely.
can't
scale.
exactly it can't exactly be perfect though because of
Of course,
The
Minecraft's
1 meter,
limitation.
of
of
course,
course.
but I do think that it's still very, very interesting to consider the fact that this is kind of, I mean, I think Minecraft's a great example of the fact that there are people out there who still value the architectural beauty of our past and who wish to keep it alive. And I mean, there's plenty of examples of that everywhere. And
And an
it's,
example, sorry,
um, I,
I would like to just
go ahead.
sort of hop in here,
No,
but
no, 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 you're all right. Go ahead.
um, Trad and we constructed a church in, I believe it was the Gothic style, in a creative world on Minecraft, which will be used in a Minecraft server that is it's not a paid realm, but it is a Minecraft server that some of the members of our Discord server are, in. And I had a really fun time assisting with the design of that particular church. And I look at that and I think we can do that in Minecraft. But if you attempted to construct a beautiful looking post office, you get rebuffed. If you want to construct a beautiful looking school, you get rebuffed.
The high school I went to was actually designed by the same people who designed the local prisons.
That well, that's the thing, is that with the central planning of modern American, ideas, it comes with the fact that just everything's going to be designed the same. It's going to be designed as boring, square. I mean, I look at my school. I'm not going to name it, but I look at my
Yeah,
school.
don't do that.
It is a dreary building with no beauty, with nothing connecting you to it, nothing that makes you think, wow, that is an amazing place. That is a hub of education. If you look to other kind of institutions of learning that were built, earlier on in history, like Oxford, and these are beautiful places with amazing architecture, but modern day, we just, in education, and I mean, like you said, in post offices, we just don't consider that anymore, and it's genuinely very sad to see.
And
What
I
is
want to talk for a second about the practicality of some of these designs, because as an engineer, a student of engineering, I look at some of these designs, and I just posted one in conference text chat if you want to take a look, and I feel nothing but pain and misery for the poor people who had to build this thing. And it just goes to show the joke I used to tell my design teacher when I was originally doing CAD and design classes, is that architects are just artists who think they're engineers. Because they build monstrosities and they think they're glorious. I mean,
like,
what is
and
this
I
thing?
can actually attest to this. So I, at one point, was looking to get into law school. I took the LSAT, which is the law school admissions test, at a local law school. And that building, to me, it looked like the scaffolding was still on the building with the way it was designed. I kid you not, almost ran into the glass because I didn't know where the door was.
Okay,
Because
so
the door also was made out of glass.
at the Ohio State House, our courthouse and our state house used to be two separate buildings, but now they're connected by an atrium. The atrium is all glass, it's steel framed, and it does not match with the building at all. It sticks out like a sore thumb. It is so ugly.
I'd also, when it comes to kind of the idea of, some people have told me that there's no reason to build beautiful structures like that anymore, that there's no purpose in it. But I think that can be rebutted with 2 points. Number one, our lives and how we are mentally are informed by what's around us. And if you walk around looking at beautiful, well constructed places, right? If you're in, say, for example, Rome, in the center of Rome, and you're looking around, you see St. Peter's, you see the Flavian Amphitheater, you see the aqueducts, you see these beautiful construction. The aqueducts were pure utility and they were beautiful. You go and you look at all these beautiful things, you're going to have such a, you're always going to feel, well, not always, obviously, but like you're generally going to feel a lot happier. But then when you compare that to modern buildings, like brutalism especially is what I'm harping on here, if you live your life looking at these brutalist garbage structures, you're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel brutal. And I think in every depiction of dystopia ever, there's no dystopia with beautiful buildings. There's no utopia with ugly ones. It is very clear that beautiful buildings inform how we are mentally, physically, emotionally. And on the second point of rebuttal, people say it's not affordable. We can't build things like that anymore because we don't have infinite wealth. But I also disagree with that point, because if you look, so within my own state, the Capitol building in Lincoln is a beautifully made Art Deco style tower, and I will send that to you, Will, since you like Art Deco. But it is a beautifully constructed tower. It's got beautiful floor mosaics, ceiling mosaics. There's a statue on the very top called the Golden Sower. And there's just so much beauty in that building. And it didn't cost more than an average state building that is built to look like the one in Ohio. But it still manages to look absolutely beautiful. So I contest both the points that there's no reason and that there's no practicality or ability. I think that we are absolutely able and we should build beautiful things more and again, because it genuinely just improves our lives. It improves what we see, and it improves the way we live. We live better when there's beauty around us.
And part of that is it's not just what's on the outside that matters, but really what's on the inside too. If I am in a beautiful looking post office, I open the door and I see regular paint on the walls, and all I see is the generic US Postal Service stuff. No beautiful artwork of, let's just say, the Greco-Roman messenger god or whatever.
That'd
Like,
be Mercury.
yes, the like I want to see beauty. I want to see, things even inside the building that just draw me to, like, if I'm waiting in line, I don't want to be waiting in this snake line, staring at the person in front of me, thinking, oh my gosh, this line is going forever. I want to be able to have my eye be drawn to something in that building so that I can just stare at it and contemplate something while I'm waiting in line at the post office.
Now I
Or heck,
agree.
we could even extend this not where we could even extend this a little bit to the grocery store too. Like, I understand you're a little bit more limited with how the inside of a grocery store looks, but you can even make that look beautiful if you try. Someone was
Absolutely.
going to say something?
I have very little else to speak on this topic, but I think that the last thing I want to say is that there's not only is it something that we should combat the building of more ugly structures, we should combat the transforming of old beautiful structures into ugly garbage piles of steel and glass.
Agreed.
For example, I know half of this panel is currently Protestant, but I think you guys can feel the pain when we talk about the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, France.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
absolutely, absolutely.
It's a beautiful church. I think
How
it
did they?
is. Go
How
ahead.
did they finally decide to redo that?
So there was. It's not. I don't think this is quite confirmed yet. But first, let me speak on. I think Notre Dame is one of the most agreed upon beautiful buildings in the world. There are very few people who deny its beauty. And yet, recently, after the fire at the cathedral, there were pushes to change the church, to build it with glass and steel, to change even the way the inside of the church is. It is a Latin Mass cathedral, but what has happened recently is that there are people who want to put projectors, screens. They want to put artificial lighting
They want
in.
to turn it into a filthy tourist trap.
Exactly. And it pains me as a Catholic, it pains me as a Christian, it pains me as someone who just adores beauty in buildings.
Hey,
And I think and that's not just with the Cathedral of Notre Dame, it's something that everyone in the world disagrees with. Most everyone in the world will fight against the changing of it into a filthy tourist trap. But on the smaller level, like even the smallest of I go to the smallest parish in my town. It's a Latin Mass church, and it's still beautiful. There are still people who want to make it look ugly. This happens from the smallest, least notable buildings to the largest, most beautiful. And I
Mom,
think it's still important that we combat this modernization and this brutalization of traditional beautiful structures.
Now, I will admit, I have a kind of personal experience. Granted, part of it had to do with money, but when I was real young, my church used to be this little tiny 100-plus-year-old chapel in the countryside. It had stained glass windows, it had a bell tower, it had all the things an old-fashioned church would have. Unfortunately, some bloody squirrel got into the electrical work and burned it down. So we had to rebuild, because the only thing that survived the fire was the bell, and it only barely survived. And the church we have now is white-sided with shingles. It's basically looks a little like a warehouse, to be perfectly honest. Now, granted, there was probably some money issues given the urgency that came up, as in, yeah, we didn't plan to build this new church. We had to build it because the old one got torched, but I agree. And I hate to see it, especially in places of worship, because those places are supposed to become places of tradition. They're supposed to be places of beauty. And the beauty of the church isn't supposed to be just material beauty. It isn't just for earth. It's to honor God. You build a church
Exactly.
beautifully because it honors God.
And I think that on the point of houses of worship, I think that everyone agrees. Everyone who is righteous in their belief, be it no matter what religion, worshipping in an ugly building does not make you want to worship. It does not make you feel closer or be closer to God. It merely ruins what worship could have been. And that's why, I mean, when I was first converting to Catholicism, I went to the parish that I go to now. And the sheer beauty of it was one of the things that genuinely got me to convert. But it it was just so painful to see, like in Los Angeles, or I mean even in Lincoln, where the cathedrals are these big square boxes with nothing beautiful about them, and it ruins any worship, in my opinion.
And it's very, shall we say, and has anybody seen the uh, Metropolitan Cathedral in Liverpool called Patty's Wigwam?
I have not.
No, I haven't.
Um, if someone could grab a picture of that and put it in the conference text chat.
What's it called again? Patty's Wigwam?
Yes, that is the nickname of it that is used.
Patty Wigwam.
Well,
Um,
while he's looking that up, I
oh,
would like to address a point brought to me by our wonderful human resources friend, Leon. Leon would like me to address evangelical mega churches, which I don't think even
don't
are
get me started on that. If you can't tell a
I would
church from a
I would
stadium,
firstly like to address the evangelical in the room. Friedrich, do you have anything to say on mega churches, on your opinion on them?
I mean, technically there are
Point
two
of order, he is a
evangelicals.
Baptist, not an evangelical.
I'm not. Yeah.
Wait a second.
Listen,
Both
all I can say is hair grow.
Wait a second. Wait a
Well,
second.
you know, I'm just smiling Joel here. I don't really like talking about that sin and stuff. I just like making people feel good, you know? Yeah. I just like
Now,
making
hang
people
on a
feel good
second.
inside.
I
I'm
have to
smiling
correct.
Joel.
I have to correct you, Victor. Both Methodist and Baptist are technically under the greater evangelical umbrella.
Yeah, technically, evangelical is an extremely big umbrella when you realize it.
Oh.
But I am not a fan of mega churches, honestly.
I'm not a
I
fan.
went to I used when I lived in California. I went to a church that originally wasn't a mega church, but started becoming a mega church with how the pastor was acting. And so my parents, as soon as they realized what was going on, we immediately left that church.
My big issue with megachurches is that they're mainly charismatic establishments where the
without any
people are
actual religious
yeah,
substance.
where the people are there because they're following the preacher, not because they're worshiping God. The
Yeah.
faith is hollow.
Quickly before we begin ripping on televangelists, let us move on.
But I want to look
Let's
on
move on
televangelist.
to discussing Patty's Wigwam, which will posted in the conference text chat.
That building looks like it would be the citadel to an endgame
Oh,
boss of D&D.
oh dearie me, that is
Like I could
quite
just
an eyesore.
imagine like a lich or something standing on top of the tower surrounded by spikes.
It's like that just
It,
looks out of place.
for
More than
any
anything else.
for our listeners, I think an apt description would be, it looks like if Sauron was wearing a wedding dress. It's so, why?
That is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard.
Sauron in a wedding dress? I mean that's probably what gave birth to this church. It's just, why?
I think the story behind the construction of that cathedral is very interesting, although I don't have it in front of me right now, so I can't exactly tell you. They actually ran out of money. It was going to be, I think, a bit bigger, but they ran out of money. So they had to settle for what they had.
They settled for that? You'd have thought they pulled out the purse of hell to pay for that thing. Like, that was financed by Lucifer himself, I promise you. That thing is yeesh.
Right. And so this just goes to show you that buildings constructed in any era could be considered to be ugly. But we actually had a question of the day today regarding our favorite royal palaces. So let's actually bring that up to the show now.
That's a great discussion topic. I can start off because I already have a great kind of idea for what I want to talk about. So, in my opinion, the best palace in the world, and this may be a bit of a personal bias, but I think I'm still allowed to make this assertion, is El Escorial in Spain. It is the royal palace for the king of Spain
Can
and
you
his
spell
family.
that?
El Escorial, E-L space E-S-C-O-R-I-A-L. El Escorial.
Thank you.
And it is mosaics floor to ceiling. It is
That,
beautiful on the outside. It is beautiful on the inside. It is
hmm,
the Versailles of Spain, and it is one
that
of the best looking buildings ever.
that does look beautiful, and you know what? It could probably pass as a cathedral or a monastery if it weren't the royal palace.
They do have a monastery within El Escorial. It's
Really?
more, well, it's more of a, yeah, the royal monastery of San Lorenzo de El Escorial. And, or if to do it with, that was for the Latin listeners. For my Spanish listeners, El Escorial, San Lorenzo de El Escorial. It is, so yeah, they have a monastery within El Escorial.
Now, to be perfectly honest, I think Buckingham Palace, while beautiful, is kind of bland. I'm kind of fond of the Winter Palace though in Russia.
The Winter Palace in Russia is quite beautiful. Victor, do you have a personal palace that you like?
I do. And I went a little off the wall with my pick. I chose St. James's Palace or St. James's Castle, the home of the Stuarts when they were on the English throne. It is one of the most gorgeous buildings I've ever seen, at least in England. And
Very
the
simplistic. I like it.
and so which goes to show you that it doesn't have to be You do not have to build an elaborate building for it to be beautiful. You don't have to do that. It can be a simple building. It can also be very beautiful.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
Now,
And
sorry,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just talk about, to finish El Escorial, I've just read this. I'd completely forgotten about this. El Escorial has two interesting things about it. Firstly, it is the largest Renaissance-style building in the world. And secondly, it was commissioned by King Felipe el Dos, or Philip II of Spain. He was the second Habsburg monarch of Spain, and he commissioned this to be built and designed by Juan Bautista de Toledo. And in case that name sounds a bit familiar to the architecture people, that is the same guy who worked on the revisions to St. Peter's in Rome. So it is got quite a legacy of important people having commissioned and worked on it.
And to hop out of Europe for a second, because it would be an injustice for us not to talk about famous palaces elsewhere. We got to give a shout out to the Japanese Imperial Palace, and of course, the Forbidden City.
Oh yes, of course.
Of course, it's one of the, I think it's a beautiful place, and I mean, even if we want to go continent hopping for a while, we could mention the royal palaces of the for example, if we want to do other Asian countries, I guess Middle Eastern is a better way to put it. We could talk about Istanbul and the imperial palace there, which was both at one point Roman, Greek, and Ottoman. And then
I'm trying to remember how the Ottoman palace is pronounced. Isn't it like Tokapai to Taki? I don't know.
I'm unfamiliar with it. I just think it's one of the more beautiful, and even in Africa, in Timbuktu, which was the capital of Mali, and the Palace of Mansa Musa, like absolutely beautiful structures all over the world.
And I find it, to bring it back a little bit, I find it beautiful when you can construct like a church and put it in the local style. It can be very beautiful and it draws the local people towards God.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things, like I was saying a while earlier, that can bring people in is the beauty.
Yes, and yes, I think a wonderful example of a palace, well, let's get back to palaces for a moment. Palaces were designed, I believe, to be beautiful and to be the house where the monarch lives. So there had to be a certain beauty to it. The Louvre itself was also a palace before it became a museum with that ugly pyramid out in front of it that ruins the aesthetic of the whole building.
Now,
Personal rant.
one thing I like to see is the difference between pre and post Renaissance palaces. Because after the Renaissance, we stopped seeing palaces have a practical. They start becoming more showy. Like, for example, the difference between the Winter Palace and the Kremlin, where the Kremlin was also a functional fortress and castle, whereas the Winter Palace is more like a French chateau that isn't necessarily functional as a defensive nature. But the big thing is, even with these functionally fortress palaces, they are still built to be aesthetically beautiful.
Entirely.
Yes, and I think we can move on and discuss and continue this discussion next week. So,
quick pet peeve. I hate it when you try and research the Kremlin and it gives you pictures of St. Basil's Cathedral. They are not the same building.
Oh yes, I mean, if we wanted to rant about confusing those two, we could pull in a couple of ortho bros and let them go for hours about that. But I do not believe we have hours to let ortho bros complain about Russia. So, what are we on? Anyone else have? Actually, we didn't hear Friedrich on his opinion.
I
Uh,
don't have a favorite castle or a favorite palace, to be honest with you. I
Oh.
can't tell. I don't know. There's too many.
In lieu, I'll throw in a German one. That would be so. Its name is extremely long and complicated, and
Oh, you
most
mean the
people.
one in Bavaria?
Yes, it is.
I love that palace.
Neuschwan.
It is
So it is the
absolutely
castle.
beautiful.
So it is the castle Neuschwanstein.
I've
built
seen that one in person when I went to Germany.
very beautiful.
I was
Yeah.
only able to watch it as we drove past it,
Of
sadly,
course.
but it was very beautiful. I wish I could
Oh,
have gone.
It
that
was.
is very
And
lovely.
what's
I also
interesting about that is
I have
that
actually. Now, I want to say something else. Sorry to interrupt you, Trevor.
no, you're all right.
I have
you're right.
seen my own personal family's castles as well. In Germany as well, my family owns a few different castles, but sadly they've almost all been reduced to ruins at this point because of the Soviets basically leaving them to ruin. And so we do have one. I can't remember what I'm not going to say what it's called right now for reasons, but it's in Dresden, and it is very. It looks more like a manor, but it's very beautiful.
Yes, and one of the most interesting things about Neuschwanstein, before I move on to the next thing I was going to say, Neuschwanstein is it was built by Ludwig II in the 1800s. That thing looks like a medieval castle. It is post-Renaissance by 100, 200 years.
Yeah.
And it is still one of the most beautiful castles in Europe. And the thing with that is that Ludwig II was actually murdered because he built that castle, because people didn't like it. They thought it was a waste. They thought it was stupid. And so the attack on beautiful buildings happened back then. And I think one more place that is very rarely mentioned when it comes to beautiful palaces. And I'm just going to go ahead.
Before you mention that palace, Neuschwanstein is the castle on which the Disney castle is
That's
based
true.
on.
Yes, a very beautiful place. And then the final place that never often gets mentioned when talking about beautiful castles and beautiful buildings, but I think should more, is Vietnam, because they actually have amazingly built Asian-style buildings there, castles and all. So I guess castle isn't the right word for it, but palaces and such. They have beautiful, beautiful buildings in
Yeah.
Vietnam as well, I think. And when you said was wrecked by the Soviets, similar thing happened in Vietnam where those beautiful buildings were destroyed by the NVA.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and speaking of the Soviets, I have to ask Frederick: did your family ever apply and successfully get their property and possession?
Some of them.
Government, some of them.
We had to buy them though, because the
Mm.
government
That's
took them, and
horrific.
then the government took them. They're like, oh, but we'll let you buy them back.
Well,
Oh,
I thought the
okay.
German government was giving
We're
them
going-
back if they were unlawfully
Okay.
taken.
All right, I'm going to get on my soapbox now. Apologies, I'm going to get on my soapbox now. The fact that the original owners of these castles and these palaces, they were stolen. Stolen.
Entirely.
They were stolen from them. The fact that you forced them to buy their own rightful, lawful property, it is unconscionable.
Absolutely.
Shout out to Prince George of Prussia, who went to fight the German government in court and won to get his property back.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Oh, hail the rightful Kaiser.
Anyway,
Yeah.
let us.
Well, it's a good thing Darth ain't here.
Oh yeah.
Right, let us. I believe now it's time to close. I think.
We have no more topics.
Well, hang on a second. I was gonna save something for the end, remember?
Oh,
And
go ahead.
I was scrolling through our Twitter earlier, and I saw in our feed that they were talking about St. Patrick's Day, and they were talking about how corned beef is a traditional St. Patrick's Day food. Now the question is, St. Patrick's Day falls on a Friday during Lent. What are they gonna do because they can't eat meat?
Well, okay, okay. In Ireland, St. Patrick is a principal patron, which means his feast is a solemnity. So in Ireland, you can eat all of the traditional St. Patrick's Day food you want. In America, I know that my bishop has granted a dispensation, and I imagine every single Catholic bishop will be granting the same dispensation to their diocese.
Wouldn't surprise
Okay,
me.
so corned beef is still on the menu.
Yes,
Yeah.
corned beef is on the menu in America. The reason why corned beef is a traditional St. Patrick's Day dish has all to do with America because the poor Irish couldn't get their hands on the other more expensive forms of beef, so they had to go for corned beef. In
Yes.
Ireland, they do not eat corned beef and cabbage. Well, they might
And-
eat cabbage.
Well-
And to quote our wonderful publicity head, he made a comment in the conference chat. Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Beautiful quote from Lord of the Rings.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. So are we ready to do the outro and go home?
Yeah.
I'm not
So-
opposed.
I guess since I'm back, I found my wallet. It was my week off, so it was perfect. But I can do the outro, and then Will, our chaplain, will do the prayer. Yeah. So we all good to
Yeah.
wrap this
Mhm.
boy up?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Shortest episode ever.
Actually, no. It's
I'm
it's
just
probably the
gonna-
shortest of your tenure, but
Well, I just say that every time there's an episode shorter
It's
than
one
an hour.
of the shortest.
yeah, one of the shortest. Okay. Now, if you would like to join us live for Monarchist Minute, you can join us by clicking that link in the description below to our Discord.
sorry, I forgot.
to mention that. Okay. Let's see. I would say
Let's not.
mulligan, but not. Okay. If you would like to join our reinvigorated Twitter, because we have more people inputting on it, because everyone knows that publishing by committee always works, you can follow us on our Twitter. Link
Link
in the description
in the
below.
description below.
If you would like to post a gab, which I posted one thing on this week, woohoo! Then you can follow us on the gab. Link
Link
in the description below.
below. Come on, everyone,
I-
join in.
Forgot to mention
No,
that
we
Gab
can't.
is
Look at
Twitter for Neocon.
Oh no, not Twitter for Neocon.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Oh, no.
reaction.
I'm
Unfortunately,
being compelled to invade random Muslim countries. George Bush be gone! George Bush be gone! George Bush be gone!
Hang on a second. It's not just Muslim countries. We do it in Latin America too.
That's true.
Hey, look, what's
I mean, it's
what's
not well, Latin American countries with Muslim countries more just we just flat out invade them like Iraq and Afghanistan.
That's
yeah,
the
I mean,
point.
but what you see, that was Trump's biggest problem. His biggest problem was that he didn't start another war.
It's
Like-
true. He was the only one in the 2000s to not start a new war.
I know. I mean, I mean, that's really the reason he lost the 2020 election. Neocons can't
He
admit
didn't
it,
have a
but-
war. He didn't have a war to go on.
Exactly.
Mm.
But anyways, if you would like to check out our website before we truly begin to rework it in earnest, which is apparently something we're going to be doing, then you can check out our website. Link
Link
in the
in the
description
description
below.
below.
Down below.
If you would like to see an Instagram or a Facebook group, because Mark Zuckerberg,
Yes.
you
Links
know,
to vote. Yes.
it-
Links
link
to vote.
in the description
Description
below.
down below.
In the description below.
And Will, I think it is time for you to finally do your job and close us in prayers because it is Lent. Okay.
Well, y'all bow your
Yes.
heads.
Yeah.
Hey, I reserve the right to say it like that. Okay, time to get serious. Well, y'all bow your heads and prepare to pray in the manner you're accustomed. Glory be to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and never shall be, world without end. And Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done. On earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Until we meet again, may the Lord protect us all. Amen.